We give you thanks. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning, Holy Cross. How are we? Good, good. Dr. Richard Selzer, in his book on mortal lessons, tells a wonderful story. If you've heard it, it's worth hearing again. It's a story of when he is in a post-operating room with a lady whom he had just operated on. He had to remove a tumor from her jaw. And in order to do so, he had to sever the nerve that attached to her, the muscles of her mouth. And so he is there with her in this hospital room, and her face is drooped. And it will be that way from now on. Her young husband is in the room with them also. And he stood on the opposite side of the bed that day. And underneath the lamplight, the two of them huddled together. And the doctor writes how, as he watched them, he just asked himself, who are these people? Who are these people who so generously and greedily cling to one another? And then, as he's looking on, the woman asked him, will my mouth always be like this? He says, yes. It will, because the nerve has been severed. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles and says, I like it. It's kind of cute. And the doctor says immediately he understood who this man was. And he lowered his gaze. He says, for one is not bold in an encounter with a God. The doctor says that the husband then bent down to kiss his wife, and he was close enough to see how the young man twisted his own mouth to fit her crooked, deformed mouth, so that she would know that their kiss still worked. I don't know about your heart, but my heart confirms what the doctor deduces. Whenever he sees this mercy, this compassion, this pity, this substance of love, and he needs to know nothing else about this guy to know he is of God. Our hearts confirm it and long for it. Surely in his actions are the fingerprints of our Creator. This story stood very much in sharp contrast with our gospel lesson today, the characters of that story. Just before we read the parable in Luke, he tells us who Jesus is talking to. It's a group of men who have been scoffing at Jesus while he teaches the crowd. They have been scoffing at him, and we're told that they have a great love for money. They're not kings and queens. They are comfortable. And in their comfort, they have been led astray over and over again. And to them, Jesus tells them this parable. Of course, we just read it. It's the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the poor man. And Lazarus lays at the gates of the rich man. And he is wounded, and he's starving to death, and he longs for a helping hand. And the rich man looks on, but does not raise a hand of help. The dogs come and lick his wounds, which is what dogs do to care for wounds. So the gospel is telling us even the dogs had mercy on this man, but the rich man had none. And so they both die, and the rich man finds himself, it's that terrible scene, right? He finds himself in the flames. And he's looking up and he sees Lazarus there with Abraham. And he still doesn't get it. He still sees Lazarus as just someone to serve him. So he turns to Abraham and he says, Abraham, send that Jew Lazarus down here to cool my tongue with a drop of water. Abraham then has to look at his own ancestor, his own family, and say, my friend, that's not the way it works. And even if we desire to help you, there's been a great chasm fixed between you and us, and we cannot. And the man is left in the flames. For a moment, we could consider, what if that chasm was not there? I think I'd like the story a little more if it was like that. But what if the chasm wasn't there? What if Lazarus, he has such empathy for the suffering of this rich man. What if he rushes from his place of comfort, filled with the pity and mercy of God, and he tries to comfort the rich man with a drop of water for his tongue. What would that have done? Would that have changed the man's situation, the problem? And more importantly, would it not a man of such character as this rich man, would not this man have seen Lazarus coming and thought it only reasonable that when Lazarus got close, he should grab a hold of him and in an effort to save his own precious soul, pull Lazarus into the flames? Would he not have done something like that? Seems would be only reasonable to a man of this character. The problem Jesus describes in this parable is not about resources and wealth. It is a problem of inner character. Considering this parable with the parable, or the story of this beautiful husband and wife scene, this husband, it seems that the one thing that the husband had, the one thing that we needed to know he had in order to say he is of God, that one thing is the one thing this rich man lacks. We know nothing else about the rich man. This one thing, and this one thing makes all the difference, doesn't it? So what is it? How would you wrap words around what this is? This one thing that makes such a difference. Something like mercy, pity, compassion for those around us. Something like this. And although this is not about things of out here, it is about the condition of the heart. But still, as Jesus shows us, these physical things of this man's life and our life, our time, our talents, our treasures, they're intimately somehow connected with the health of our hearts. Do we see this in the parable? We do. Many of us today, me included, when we hear of these men who Jesus tells this parable to, I think we can relate to them. Actually, I know one of you can, because you came to me at a dinner, of one of our meet and greet dinners, and you said, Rob, in the comforts of my life, I just start to worry, right? Man, about all the Lazarus out there. And here I am with you tonight, and look at this feast. We can relate to these men. And then, so when we hear Paul, in his letter to Timothy, talk about the love of money being the root of all kinds of evil. And it's the love of money, right? It's not money, it's the love of money. It's a heart issue he's talking about. When we hear him talk about this, we know what he's talking about, don't we? We know of the traps which he's describing. And so we perk our ears and we hear then Paul go on. So, man of God, person of God, shun all this. Pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, gentleness. Fight the good fight. And we just don't know if we can do all that. I mean, we know us. I know me. I'm not a pious type. I'm a hard-headed type. And Jesus thankfully boils all this stuff down for us today in this one clear thing. It comes from that opening collect. I hope you heard it that we prayed at the beginning of our service. Oh God, you declare your almighty power through showing mercy and pity. And then he calls us to this one thing, my friends, that the way to make sure that the way we use our time, our talents, and our treasures form well what is in here. To make sure all this, whatever we do in it, takes care of what's in here. For it turns out that God does not desire you to be merciful and generous only because he loves the Lazarus. It's because he loves us. And because this is the way we are grown into people that can receive blessings. It is when we are merciful in our day planners and in our checkbooks that we are blessed. Like many of you, I believe, you agree with me that we've experienced the blessings of this. I know I have. I've gone through the journey in my life of not giving anything to anyone to becoming a person who, in my piety, I tithe to the church. But it's more than that. It's about living a generous life, engaged in mercy. And the more merciful I've become, the more engaged in those around me, it's freeing. The more tended I am inside. I've experienced, like many of you, this truth of Jesus, that it is in caring for others that we find our blessing. And so because we can experience this in this life, how much more should we expect the blessings of the next life, which will result from this to be? We are formed by the way we live these lives. So let this simple one thing be our goal: to prioritize our living, no matter where we are, in a way that proclaims God's mercy, His power through mercy and pity. I think y'all do this pretty well, by the way. I've been with you 8 weeks now. And as I finished this sermon up, I realized that this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad to be a part of you. The way you love one another. Let us remember, however, when we begin to be afraid that we're not good enough, that we don't do this well enough, remember that story that I told you at the beginning today. When that man bent over to kiss his wife and he molded his mouth in the shape of hers. Remember that story, because this is the same thing that we see God has done for us in putting on the flesh of Jesus. In Jesus, God molded His own being into our deformed being, so that He could give us that kiss and assure us that no matter of our deformity, no matter of our depravity, we still fit. Our kiss still works with Him. Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for the mercy and pity which you show upon us and the blessings of this life. Help us to use them well, so that we may be blessed by you and be your blessing to others. In Jesus' name, amen.